That's lovely to be here on a 4 o'clock. Thank you so much for being here. So my name is Patrick Melville. I'm a mental health expert and I run Melville Mental Solutions. My background is marketing and advertising and building a brand, but I had to stop very quickly when I was diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer in 2017. And thankfully I came back, had treatment. But I realized the connection between branding. So that's why I relaunched to focus on the mental sides. We are so fragile. And of course, as a brand, we don't look after our brands last. So it's a real opportunity and privilege to be here with Advertising Week and to talk about a big brand, really big brand, Mooma Foods. So can I ask who here has heard or has eaten Mooma Foods? Hands up, please. Oh. Okay, nice to know. Good bit of marketing.
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks, buddy. Thanks.
Well, for those who don't know or want a reminder, I want to introduce Tom Mercer, the ex-CEO and founder of Mooma Foods. And Tom, could you give a summary of the story?
Yeah, thanks very much, Paddy. Thanks very much for coming, everybody. So, super quick intro to the brand before we get into the meat of the talk, really. So my background is I'm a farmer's son from Staffordshire. After uni, came to London, worked as a management consultant, wanted to set up my own business, desperately wanted to do my own thing. And I thought there was a gap in the breakfast market for a healthy, filling, on-the-go breakfast. So we launched with a stall in Waterloo East train station, which was a filing cabinet on wheels with branding on the outside. We used to start work at 2:15 in the morning, making the breakfast in a railway arch in Deptford. We grew from 1 stall to 9 stalls, and then off the back of that started selling into offices, then supermarkets, airlines, trains, and so on. Lots of pivoting along the way from the stalls to Bircher Muesli, which was our main product, and then onto porridge, and then more recently onto oat milk. Along the journey, actually, I was diagnosed with MS in 2010, and Paddy and I actually kind of bonded, both bald-headed in a cafe, chatting about stuff kind of back in 2017. So yeah, that was 2010. I sold the business in the end of 2021 to AG Bar. I left personally in July last year, so finished the business. The business is still being run by the same team. They're doing a great job taking it from strength to strength. First thing I did was, after having a bit of time off, is I walked down England actually, which was amazing. So 730 miles, absolutely loved it. One of the best months of my life. Really lucky that my family supported me to do it. So that was a great way to kind of clear my head. And then it's on to the next thing in my career. For my sins, I'm trying to throw my hat in the ring with politics at the moment, which is a very different thing. And I very much feel like a fish out of water with that. So that brings me up to speed with kind of where I'm at now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So we want to sort of separate our conversation into sort of two sides. And something relevant for any work that we all do. It's about the stress drivers and how we manage those moments. Of course, you started from nothing, and I want to hear more a bit about that. And then, of course, the other side is, it's all very well talking about a problem. This is like a pitch that we all work on, isn't it, in this industry? You know, you get a pitch, well, your role is to sort out the problem. You can't just stand there and complain to clients or whoever it is. And of course, the main thing is this is where the word mental resilience comes in. It's a positive way of managing these stress drivers. So we'd love to hear more about that. We'll come on to that. So Tom, could you please start by your story about, what were these stress drivers?
Yeah, sure. So there were lots of highs and lows in the business, in any business, and particularly I think with startup brands. The highs were, I don't know, just the buzz and excitement of doing it. Anybody that sets up their own business really gets that. And particularly if you're really passionate about it, and I think it's impossible to set up a business unless you're super passionate about it. So yeah, setting it up, kind of defying the odds, building a team, getting those first sales, getting into your first shop, your first supermarket, your first airline, and building the team was really exciting. And getting the feedback from customers was probably almost the best thing for me, actually. When you get people writing in, telling you how much difference the product makes to their life and they really enjoy it. And you're like, oh my God, it really makes your day. But of course, there's loads of tough bits as well. I was always, the thing that was really important to me was the product always. And the product's obviously really closely related to the brand. And I used to get really down when there was an issue with our products. The shelf life wasn't right, or we had a problem with our oat supply or something, and it just didn't taste as good as it should. So something really practical like that used to get me down. Team issues are obviously always important, and for me it's working hard is not really a problem. It's when there's aggro and conflict, and I'm sure it's the same with all of you in all of your workplaces. That's what is really stressful. Finance is obviously stressful. You know, there's times where you're worrying if you can pay people on Monday, and you're delaying payments to your suppliers to make sure you can pay the staff. So those things are always very tricky. I find I don't always sleep very well, and that's kind of how stress manifests itself. So you're working really hard, and then you want to get a good night's sleep, but you can't sleep either. So you kind of wake up at 3 a.m, kind of worrying about stuff. So for me, those are the stress drivers. In my particular business was product, team, if there were issues on it, finance, if there were issues on that. And for me, it manifested itself in terms of, not sleeping very well, really.
It's interesting how what stands out for me from your experience is the word control. We have all these things to think about, and we tend to worry about things we can't control. And I think obviously on the branding side, that's definitely something there where you're putting something out, you're changing, you're trying new things, expectations are so strong there. And I think control is something where the kind of worries can really come from. Was that something which came from building the brand? And I remember you always talking about you from a basement in Deptford.
No, we were in a railway arch in Deptford. So I got very little sunlight actually, which probably didn't help in terms of vitamin D levels, which is a key thing in MS actually. So that wasn't ideal from that point of view. But in terms of control, I guess for me, kind of having really reflected on it, stress comes from a lack of control, and that lack of control can kind of be because you feel really out of your depth and you don't know what you're doing. And I think we all feel that, a bit of imposter syndrome sometimes. You just don't have the tools. Nobody's taught you properly how to do a certain job, and that's really stressful. Trying to get into politics recently, there's been times I've gone for interviews and I've been like, whoa, I'm totally out of my depth here, real fish out of water, and that's stressful. And the other time you feel out of control is where you've just got too much on your plate, and all of us can have too much on your plate. So for me, trying to maintain the control is important, but it's nice to be slightly out of your comfort zone. I started my career at Bain, the consultancy firm, and they used to say the best way of learning is when your head is just above water. So you're not drowning, but you're having to kind of paddle hard underneath the surface. So I think it's good to be a little bit out of your comfort zone, but make sure you don't push it too far.
And it's interesting on that angle. What I tend to do when I'm doing my programs and workshops, I'm a mental health first aid England instructor as well, is to say it's okay to be stressed. It's just managing that time period. I mean, I have to say, and be honest, I was a bit stressed coming here. So no, I'm going to talk to you guys. But it's, of course, appreciating that and working on ways to do that. So that's the focus, though. That's why I think we've been asked to come along. We all have stress. Okay, thank you. But what about ways that you built your mental resilience to manage these moments? Can you share your experience on that?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing to kind of say on that is to appreciate that everybody can be pushed too far. Like everybody in any field. I've got friends who are like super competent and capable and like kind of all really struggling stuff in kind of lots of different fields. So I think it's important to try and manage yourself around there, manage those stress drivers, how you respond to them, and it's different for different people. But in terms of how to manage it, from my perspective, like I was saying, I think stress is caused by being out of control, so you need to try and understand what's happening. If it's because you don't understand what you're doing enough and you feel like a real fish out of water or just haven't got the tools to deal with something, make sure somebody teaches you how to do that. Put your hand up and say, look, I really need some help on this stuff. It's not been explained properly. If you've got too much on your plate, I don't know, try and delegate it. It's kind of, it's hard when kind of shit hits the fan and you're really up against a tight deadline. But if you've got too much on your plate, if you can, either you work through it for a short amount of time, but then you need to think actually kind of, how can I move things off my plate? There's no point just kind of banging your head against a brick wall the whole time. So manage that stress by looking logically at why you're not in control of it.
So just to add to that, what I like your point there is about sharing.
Yeah.
And I think our minds can be very negative. It's quite normal to say, I'm the only one, to think that's going to happen. For example, Mental Health Awareness Week is happening now as we speak, and I think that's one of the reasons we're here. And about sharing that is such a good point to know. I mean, you weren't sharing, we're talking about it now.
Yeah.
What else would you say are the kind of ways that you could control and build your resilience?
Yeah, I think being able to offload and vent to somebody is really, really important. Whether it's somebody at work, and it work's tricky because obviously you want to kind of maintain your professionalism, but maybe there's somebody at the same level as you in the business that you can go out and go for coffee with or whatever, and just, you know, say this is shit, what's happening, and just get it off your chest. And my wife hears everything kind of about the stuff I'm doing, and she's brilliant in terms of she always seems interested, although I'm sure she's often not. But she listens to it all, and it's great because I kind of offload it, I vent, I rant, and kind of it just gives me a bit of perspective on stuff. And she's always super supportive of anything I'm doing as well. So that really helps to know that somebody's got your back. You know, whether it's a partner or somebody at work or some mates down the pub or whatever. So I think having that way to let off steam is really important. And I think trying to get perspective on it is really important as well. Kind of, we can all kind of, and it's the hardest thing is when you're really in the thick of it, right? You can't see the wood for the trees, but if you can take a step back and realize that actually in the big scheme of what's happening in the world, you know, just have to look at the news, there's some really big stuff going on. And it's important to try and take yourself out of that bubble a little bit, and it's quite hard to do. For me, I mean, people will give you the standard stuff of kind of like getting proper sleep, eating, doing exercise, and all that stuff is really important. For me, kind of going on a walk is great, you know, getting out into nature, seeing things, it kind of really just helps put that into perspective. A small tip that I kind of started doing recently is writing stuff down at night. So if I've got stuff on my mind, I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm not sure sometimes if it's a dream or it's something else is going on, and I start worrying about stuff. Whereas if I've written it down or email it to myself and okay, point number 1, we're doing this on it. Point number 2, we're doing this. Point number 3, we're doing this. They might not all be resolved, but I've got action points and ways I'm addressing stuff. So if I wake up in the night, I'm like, have I done this or not? Am I dealing with it or not? Then I know that actually, you know what, I've written it down. It's under control. It might not be finished, but I know what I'm doing on it, and then it can hopefully put it to the back of your mind.
Well, again, that's the point of sharing, and I think what's quite dangerous generally is comparing. That's a really dangerous word, and of course, in this industry that we work in, there's nothing but the first thing you do is a bit of marketing research. Let's compare ourselves to other brands. Let's see how we're doing. And of course, I don't know about you, but not many people get trained about building mental resilience. It's a new theme. And I think comparing is something which needs to be understood better. So for example, I like what you're saying, you know, you found the ways that matched you. As a mental health first aid England instructor, you teach people, if you're just trying to help someone, you've got to understand that everyone has their own, what we call literally a stress container. Mine, I have to put my hands out there, is very small. So it doesn't take many things to drive my stress. I have to be able to open it. And again, what you're talking about is ways to open that food, or talking is a good way. So not comparing yourself to others is something sort of to look at. And again, branding is obviously core to that. I'd love to know a bit more about sort of the ideas of one of your points you said about get perspective, about the fact that not comparing or just having that limit. Under sort of the stress container as a first aider, you're taught that you'll have stress and will go in, and your stress go up. Something that will annoy you in the evening wouldn't have stressed you or annoyed you in the morning because you've got more stress and you're trying to push it down and then you burn out. Very simple analogy. That kind of honesty about that, how was that with your journey?
Yeah, I think getting that perspective is hard, and the problem is when you're in those stressful situations, that's the time that you're just trying to get stuff done, you know, and you don't have time to go and get perspective and go on a walk and that sort of stuff. So it's easy to sit here and say this is what you should do, but that's the hardest time to actually do it. So I don't know, having those people lined up, or your go-to people that you can kind of vent to, or your go-to methods of being like, okay, I'm stressed, I'm going to jump on the exercise bike, I'm going to go for a swim, I'm going to, I don't know, eat a tub of ice cream, something like that. So you've got to have your go-to things are really to relieve that pressure, enables you to step back and say, okay, get a bit of perspective on the situation.
What I like also is the word that stands out for me is the word should. Should, if I can ask anyone, and I tried this in 2023 and it worked, don't use the word should. It's quite a fake, shallow word. You should get up. You should make your clients happy. You should use every single pound that you're given for a campaign to demonstrate the value. You should be happy all the time. And that's something that even comes internally as well. So I think the word should is something where I ask to take that away and to work on understand what do you want to do? What is the choice that you make? And of course, the choices that you made, you had to work with them, didn't you? And I kind of imagine when you're making a choice as a leading this business, what were the ways that your team worked with that, and how did you manage that?
Yeah, the team was great. You know, we really tried to have a good culture at Mooma. It was a very supportive, I think, kind of kind culture, and you know, we hired people that we got on well with. We tried to hire diverse bunch in terms of different characters and so on in the business, but yeah, generally nice people. And I think kind of, you know, everybody's at work, and it annoys me sometimes when you're on the phone to people. It's normally when you're on the phone rather than face to face, and people get really aggressive and arsey, and there's just no need for it. And at the end of the day, everybody's at work because they're trying to do a good job, but it's also a job, and they're at work, and the other person on the other end of the phone is also trying to do a good job. So if people can be a bit nicer in everything in the world, then I think kind of things will go a lot smoother.
It was building it into the brand. So if there were some takeaways we could look at, because then what we'd love to do is ask if you any questions, you know, like classic conversation with a client or so, you know, when you're trying to pitch. It's not about us so much, it's about you guys, you're here. We want to make that time valuable. So let's go on to these 3 points. If you could give 3 takeaway points to share with your experience building the brand and selling it.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, it would go back to kind of what I said before, is kind of recognize the cause of the stress and try and change it. So if you don't understand something, get someone to explain it. If you've got too much on your plate, try and move stuff off your plate. If you're really pissed off, rant to somebody, vent to somebody, let some steam off, and then get some perspective. And perspective is really helpful in terms of just, you know, trying to look at stuff objectively. So in Mooma, my pride and joy for the first 7 years was our bircher muesli. And some of you may have had the bircher muesli. It was our first product, and it was doing really well. It was in all the supermarkets, but the sales weren't growing. It wasn't sustainable. And it took me 7 years to realize, you know what, this product's just a little bit niche, and it's not gonna. And that's when we kind of pivoted onto porridge, and then we pivoted onto oat milk. And now kind of the business does porridge and oat milk, and the bircher muesli's totally gone. You know, it died a slow death, unfortunately. It was my baby that went. But having that perspective gives you the objectivity, and it is really hard, particularly in a startup business where you've got to be so passionate, but kind of the best businesses combine passion with rational objectivity, and those two things are kind of totally contradict each other in some ways, and actually kind of perspective helps you to kind of say, okay, I really need the passion, but I've got to look at this objectively. And that's why we pivoted several times from the businesses. And it may be kind of in the jobs that a lot of you guys are in, I think kind of getting that objectivity when about a campaign's not working or a plan's not working, and actually, you know what, we need to just say, that's done, move on to the next thing, or rethink it and start again. And we did that, I don't know, 4 times in our journey as a brand, over 18 years.
Okay. And what about your point about leaning on others? When you're saying that, you said you find a trusted person. How did you also encourage others? So, for example, people might come to you because you had that, you know, that senior role, or maybe you're not the right person. How did you tell that person to get help, so to speak, or what they could use in a sort of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose it's a skill that actually wouldn't come naturally to me. You know, kind of if you look at people, I wouldn't be, I don't think, a natural kind of people person in the workplace. Hopefully not too bad, but there are other people that were better at it than me. But I think just trying to encourage a kind environment. I know that sounds a bit cliche and cheesy, but genuinely one where people kind of look out for each other.
Yeah.
If you can encourage an environment where people work really hard, but they do it because they want to, and they know that you've got their back. And kind of when I've made that clear to people, I know in the pandemic, a couple of people went on furlough, but guys, you know what, the business is fine, we've got enough cash in the bank, we're going to do well, we're going to get through this. Kind of that reassurance to people is really, really important. So yeah, we tried to foster an environment where people did work really hard, but we didn't need to be there with a whip, kind of cracking the whip, because everyone was brought into the same kind of ethos in the brand.
Brilliant, thank you. So, we'd love to put it out to you guys, please. If anyone's got any questions, does anyone have any? Please.
Oh, thank you. Hi.
Hey.
Hello.
Oh, that was loud.
So, could you give your name and where you work?
I am Jennifer Riley Simone. I am a professor of marketing at Indiana University. You talked about how comparing is detrimental to mental health, and I completely agree with you. But business is set up, and school is set up, and politics is set up, where we are being compared constantly for success. So I wanted to know how we actually move through the world successfully without having comparison be a part of it.
Yeah, from my perspective, I don't know. I don't think necessarily comparison's always bad. Like kind of competition and stuff is kind of part of the marketing environment we work in. But I think I suppose for me, it's being able to separate kind of your work life from personal life, and actually you can be competitive at work, hopefully in a collaborative way within your team, but in terms of other companies and other brands, and competition, hopefully healthy competition is going to be inevitable. But being able to step out of that and having a life outside of that where you're just a normal person and you can chat with your friends and play with your kids and go to the park and go to the pub and that sort of stuff is really important. Just kind of keep you grounded. I think that's really important. If you live and breathe work too much, then I think that's probably detrimental.
Can I add to that also from a mental side, that the key words to understand are feelings versus rationality. Sometimes your mind can be too emotional, and that can overwhelm. It's okay in some ways to compare, but in a rational perspective, there'll always be things to compare with. But if you let your emotions get in, then they can be unreal, and that's when you make decisions or you panic. And I think that's one of the kind of key tips to think about. Please, another one.
Thank you for this. Hi, everybody. My name is Marina Pavlovic. I come from Belgrade, Serbia. Me and my colleague are part of an executive group advertising agency focusing on content specific. What you're saying here resonates really naturally to me, but I think a lot of us might face this when we're dealing with maybe different generations, older generations. So how do we bridge that gap between the generations when we talk about mental resilience? Because maybe somebody who is above millennial generation might not find it so, natural. Like even if I speak with my parents, they would say, we come from Serbia. They say, just move on. What do you mean? It's tough. Who asked me? So we come across in our businesses as well. Some senior marketers might think the same. So how do you, if you have any advice on how do we bridge that gap between generations? Thank you.
I think you sit back and you talk about the word resilience. I think it's a good way. If you use the word mental health, sadly, there'll always be a stigma about it. I think always going to jump. Resilience is actually a theory. You need to do things to be resilient. And so I would push back and say, what things do you do to build your resilience? And that's kind of a question like anything. There's a very good book about changing the mind and about pushing it back to the person. It's like a marketing, advertising strategy, isn't it? It's how you pitch to someone. What is your perspective? How can we move the problem? So translating the word resilience, its ability to recover quicker. Doesn't mean that other ways won't work, but you can recover quicker. That's a kind of mental side I would recommend. Tom?
Yeah, it's a really interesting challenge. I mean, in the UK, I think it's gone from kind of very low awareness to like super high awareness now, actually, and there's kind of almost been a swing back against it a little bit in some policy making recently in terms of kind of people being signed off sick from work and that sort of stuff. So there's been quite a lot of debate around it. So, but yeah, I'm not really sure. I think kind of like speaking to people and kind of just explaining the situation to them, the older generation. I mean, every generation will know about this stuff if they're honest with themselves and they actually kind of say, oh yeah, I have found that tough, or so-and-so, you know, I don't know what the number is, kind of suicides per day in the UK, you know, it's a lot, you know, hundreds of people, and it's, so everybody of every generation is familiar with mental health issues, even if they don't feel as comfortable talking about them, I think.
Hi, I'm Nadia and I work at Save the Children. I lead their brand there.
Lovely.
I was wondering if either of you have ever had a kind of instance where your mental health is so linked to the outcomes of other people through whether your brand building or marketing achievements would actually have a direct impact on other people's lives, and how you kind of remove yourself from that situation, because it can be quite tricky from a mental health perspective.
Yes, I think the word boundaries come to mind. And I don't know about you, you know, how many boundaries, do you have a personal mental boundary of yourself? That's one of the pieces of work which I'm renewally going into, educating people. And of course, it's putting that line down, being honest. It's a very good example, like, you know, you've got to look after yourself first, if to be in a position to look after someone else. And of course, our minds can be very negative. But again, it's being honest with yourself, being honest with the other person, because you're saying, how can I help you if I'm not in the right state of mind to look after yourself? So I hope that's something to validate building those boundaries and being honest with yourself as well as the other person. Do you have any thoughts?
I've not really, when I've been working on something that's directly affected people outside, you know, kind of Mooma was about food products, you know, so it wasn't quite as impactful as something. Well, it's very different to kind of what you're working with Save the Children, but kind of, I suppose, my life, kind of what I'm doing, the work I'm doing, you know, kind of stress would impact my family directly, and, you know, kind of I find if I'm really stressed, you know, I'm sure you all feel it, you just get slightly more irritable, you know, you're not sleeping as well, you're a bit snappier, you're a bit grumpier, you don't have as much time, and that affects your family, and that's kind of a serious consideration for everybody, really. So yeah, only within my circle, really, not kind of outside that, just because of kind of the industry I've been working in.
Could we do maybe one more question, please?
Yeah, sure.
And of course, we're around afterwards. Please grab us if you would like.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm coming from Turin College, performance creative in there, and also I'm doing my master's degree in branding at UAL. And you mentioned that about the mental health and all the situations, the stress, people have to accept everything what is happening, and it's okay to be stressed. So my question is, how absurd can be integrated in branding for companies and help people to accept what's happening in their daily lives?
How can what, please?
Absurd.
Absurd. In what context?
So I think that absurd can be playful in terms of, I saw wellness brands, for example, oh, it's raining, but it's fine, I'm happy. And it's putting those imageries of how a person is actually drowning with captions saying, I'm okay. So it's like making almost as humorous, but also incorporating absurd in there. So I'm not sure if you're aware of brands like that, but...
So you're asking how it can be incorporated, or should it be, or...?
Both, probably.
From an advertising point of view, I guess I'm not sure, but from a stress point of view, and a kind of, I suppose, building on what Paddy said, I think kind of, for me, kind of stress, a certain level of stress is a good, this is not really answering your question directly, but I'll come on to it. A certain level of stress is a good thing. I think it's important to, you know, it gives me a buzz, it makes me feel like I'm learning, it is exciting for me. Too much stress is a bad thing, and kind of knowing where those levels are is important. But
Can I say, sorry,
you
just
wanna
because we
leave
haven't
it
got
to-
long left, but we'll definitely talk about it afterwards. I just want to say, if anybody wants to get in touch with Tom, his email address is tom@tommercer, TOMMERCER.co.uk, and I'm Patrick, PATRICK, at melville-solutions.com. So please chat afterwards, definitely you. Okay, is that all right?
Yeah, it's cool. Thanks, Paddy.
We're going to get ejected out or something.